Beyond the 10th by Tuesday Love Sang Rampa. Read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Chapter 2. The old man shifted warily in the uncomfortable wheelchair. "No springs," he muttered. "Even a baby carriage has springs, yet the ones who are sick have to jog along as comfortlessly as in a farm cart." It had been a cheerless day, and one which was far from ended. Letters and more letters, all of them wanting. "You are my mother and my father," said the letter from Africa, "and I love you like my best girlfriend. Now I want to come and tell you so. Will you send me a free return ticket so that I may? And at the same time, send the fare so that I can see my sister who lives in Los Angeles. I shall expect this by return and will kiss the dust at your feet." The old man sighed ruefully and set aside the letter. "Thinks I'm a millionaire, does he?" he asked the little girl cat, purring alongside. Old Maggie was out of the mental hospital again, and had resumed her barrage of unwanted love letters. Old Maggie, the woman who journeyed to this Canadian seaport and told people she was employed by the old man, said she was employed by him, ran up a bill for $168 in his name, and sent a frightened hotel manager to the old man for the money. Money which was not forthcoming. "I have never seen this woman," said the old man, "and she deluges me with her letters which I tear up. No, I have no work or money for her." So old Maggie cheerfully admitted that she'd just left a mental home, and she was deported back to one. Mrs. Horsehead's letter, too, was a bother. 22 pages of it. All questions. Questions which would need a book to answer. This book, Mrs. Horsehead. Dear, dear Mrs. Horsehead, the lady who had things written to her in words of one syllable, and who had still managed to read the wrong meaning in everything. Yes, the old man was weary. The day was long, and the letters were longer. Outside, the summer weather of deep, deep fog swirled blackly, smearing windows with a greasy scum and hiding the ramshackle buildings near the waterfront. Somewhere out in the fog, a ship hooted mournfully, as if in despair at having to enter this moribund seaport, where the water stank to high heaven, with the discharging effluvia of a nearby pulp mill. The old man grunted, "Phew, what a stench!" and turned to signing the letters, all 43 of them. The little girl cat stood up, arched her back, and said, "Arr," before going off to her tea. The littlest girl cat was still abed, recovering from a chill easily induced by the damp fog and intense humidity of these summer days. The wheelchair groaned in dismay beneath the 260 pounds of weight as the old man turned to switch on the lights. "Lights," he muttered. "Lights. Are they really necessary at 5 in the afternoon on a midsummer's day?" The years bore down heavily. Years of suffering, years of sorrow, years made even more sorrowful by the cowardly men of the press who always printed lies, being strangers to the truth, and who never dared afford an opportunity for a reply to their columns. Cowardly men, despicable men who live by pandering to their readers' worst emotions, who drag down culture instead of helping it up. The dreary evening slowly wore on. The faintest of faint glows showed that, somewhere outside the fog-enshrouded windows, street lamps were alight. Eerie, crawling glimmers, like fireflies afar, showed that late workers were making their slow way home behind straining headlights. At last it was late enough to retire. The old man trundled his wheelchair to the side of the hard bed and climbed in. With a sigh of relief, he settled back. Now for freedom, he thought. Freedom to wander at will throughout the world by astral travel. For some moments he rested, lost in thought. Then, the night's journey decided upon, he relaxed for the preparatory stages. Soon there came the familiar slight jerk, almost a start as if one had been frightened. And with the slight jerk, the astral body shook free from the physical. Shook free and drifted upwards, higher and higher. The fog was all around the harbor. A few miles further out, the fog thinned and was gone. At the airport, the lights were on and the infrequent aircraft were still able to make their landings. Out in the Bay of Fundy, a large oil tanker rode at its moorings, rode at anchor, its riding lights swaying slightly as the ship heaved to the change of the tide. Aboard the oil ship, men were still playing, gambling with packs of cards before them and piles of money on the floor. They seemed happy enough, although impatient to get ashore to whatever entertainment this poor port could offer them. Entertainment? What sort of entertainment does the average sailor want? And that can be found in even the poorest of ports, and the poorer the port, the cheaper that form of entertainment, although possibly the dearest in the end. The old man, not old any longer, now that he was not encumbered by an ailing body and a creaking wheelchair, drifted along across the Bay of Fundy. He stopped a while at the little town of Digby, nestling between hills, a quaint little place, one which it would be nice to visit in the flesh because, in the astral, colors are rather different. It's like taking off smoked glasses and seeing things as they are. From Digby on to Yarmouth to look at that little place with its narrow streets and crowded houses. Seemed to be just one main street with a few scattered houses around. And, oh yes, a shockingly crazy woman lived down there. Move on to Halifax. A slight pause, and the ground blurred beneath, blurred with the speed of travel. And then the lights of Halifax came swiftly into view. Halifax, what an unfriendly city, what a horrible city, was the personal opinion of the old man floating above. He thought for a moment of that stupid old biddy at the airport who said she was a good Catholic and they didn't want heathens in clean Halifax. Still, that's in days gone by. Today is today, and tomorrow, well, a few miles further on and we shall be in tomorrow. So, a circle around Halifax, passing the big Paragon buildings, passing over the naval station and the Bedford Basin, seeing the lights a twinkle on the wooded slopes flanking Bedford Basin. The lights of the rich people, the ones who could just buy and order what they like, the ones who could get medical attention and not count the cost, not like the old man who, because he was so sick, couldn't get insured with the Blue Cross or the Green Shield or whatever it is. They all seemed to want their cake and eat somebody else's. So the old man could not afford medical attention in young, bustling Canada, and so he suffered because of lack of money, because of lack of medical attention, which he could not afford. So thinking, he rose higher and higher, rose up to where he could see the sunlight, and sped on across the Atlantic. Soon a satellite came hurtling by, a satellite reflecting bright silver as it caught the rays of the sun. But the old man wasn't bothered by the satellites or anything of that nature. They were too common, too usual. He sped on and overtook an Air Canada plane shrieking its way across the Atlantic, bound for where? Shannon? Prestwick? Or possibly going straight to Le Bourget in France. Astral travel has many advantages. The plane was overtaken and passed with no more than a glance in the cabin windows, where all the tourists and economy passengers were sitting, 3 abreast on both sides of the aisle, with the blue light which simulated night shining dimly down upon them. Some were there with their mouths wide open, and there along the other aisle was a woman with her mouth wide open and her skirts up around her thighs. Sound asleep she was, oblivious of the interested gaze of the young man beside her, who was wishing that there was more light. In the pilot's cabin, the captain at the controls was smoking his pipe and looking like a placid old cow seen in an Irish field. His co-pilot, sitting beside him, was looking bored to tears, and the flight engineer behind them and to the right was holding his head in his hands, as if life was just too insupportable. On sped the old man, far outstripping the speed of the plane, which was lumbering behind at perhaps 600 or 700 miles an hour. And soon, over the curve of the horizon, came the loom of the lights of London and the flashing beacon, which was London Airport. Here, in London, the streets were by no means deserted, although it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and a fine morning, too. Busy work gangs were moving about, sweeping the streets, clearing up the litter, and here and there manholes in the streets were opened, and little frames with red flags above them prevented the unwary from falling down. Here were the sewer men carrying out their nightly inspections, deep underground, while the rest of London slept. But how London has changed, the old man thought. This great building stretching up, and then he remembered, oh yes, of course, that's the new post office tower, supposed to be the highest in England. Thoughtfully, interestedly, he circled around it and saw the men inside more or less killing time. Things weren't very busy at this hour of the night, and the old man moved on through Victoria Street. A train was just coming into the station, and weary passengers were picking up their luggage and stretched cramped legs. In the taxi ranks, the cab drivers were waking themselves up from a light doze, starting their cabs and waiting for their fares. But the old man drifted along, looking at familiar places in Victoria Street, and then he spied an immense new building, the windows of which overlooked the gardens of Buckingham Palace. What bad taste, he thought. What bad taste. that these building promoters should intrude upon the privacy of the royal family who have done so much for England, even against the active opposition of the press, who always take any opportunity, no matter how unjustified, of picking faults with the royal family. A family who's done more for England than any other Englishman or woman. But down below, red double-decker buses still roar through the streets, carrying night workers to or from their nightly shifts. Perhaps this little jaunt to England should come to an end now. There is so much else to see. But before leaving England, let us look along the length of Fleet Street again and read some of the early morning headlines. Here it says that the press of England are having a very bad time financially. They cannot put up the price of their papers, for people will not pay any more. 6 pence for a newspaper! A lot of money for a paper into which one wraps one's fish and chips. Personally, the old man thought, the daily newspapers, the whole bunch of them together, are not worth halfpenny. And the sooner they go bankrupt, the better for this world, for they generate hate between nations and between peoples. Can anyone truly say the press has ever done any good? So thinking, the old man turned his thoughts southwards, and in the astral flight took a wide sweep straight over the English Channel. Straight over Paris he went, where he gave just a passing glance at the home of de Gaulle, the troublemaker, before speeding on to South America, to the River Plata, to the land of Uruguay, Montevideo. Here in Montevideo, the time was about midnight. The streets were still thronged. Demonstrations were in progress. Students were rioting. And even as the old man watched from a few feet above the city, a lusty student hand-propelled a large rock straight through the face of a clock standing on the sidewalk by a familiar bus stop. There was a shattering of glass and a shower of sparks, and the face of the clock grew dark. No longer did it indicate the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. Around the street corner, a gang of grey uniformed police swirled, sticks in their hands, caps awry, arms outflung to catch any student who came within their reach. The old man floated along, thinking of what could have been the future of Uruguay. It could have been a wonderful place. It could have been the garden of South America, supplying exotic fruits to the rest of the world. It could have been the Switzerland of South America, looking after the money and the financial interests of the whole of North, Central, and South America. But the Uruguayans were unequal to the tasks before them, like a man who has never had an illness before, and so, not immunized, falls prey to the first slight sickness. Uruguay, with never a bit of suffering, went to pieces when the first storms ruffled their apparently calm surface. The old man thought of a year or so before, when he had visited the astral world and consulted the Akashic record of the probabilities, and saw what should have been for Uruguay. The interior of Uruguay is arid because the Uruguayans had cut down all the trees, and the land in the interior is almost barren, almost desert, without water, without vegetation, and seems to be only sun-baked earth which, drying and powdering, blows away at the first puff of wind. The Akashic record of probabilities showed that the Uruguayans should have floated alone in neighboring countries and should, by carefully controlled atomic blasts, have excavated a great basin, perhaps 30 miles by 50 miles, in the center. It would have filled from deep wells because the water is there below the surface. It would have filled, and it would have been a wonderful lake or lagoon, bringing life to the land of Uruguay. Then there would have been trees planted all around the shores of the new lake, and the trees would have brought new atmosphere to a devitalized zone. Soon the land would have flourished. It would have been lush pasture land, rich orchards, and land which should have been the garden of South America. The record of probabilities showed that there would have been a canal leading from the center of the country along to Maldonado, where there is such very deep water and such a very beautiful curve to the shoreline that is indeed a natural harbor. The main harbor should have been there at Maldonado, because the present harbor at Montevideo is silting up, and the whole of the River Plata is now a shallow stretch of water, dredged constantly in the ever-shifting sands. But the old man, floating above, looking down, thinking of all these things, shook his head with sorrow at the thought that the Uruguayans had not measured up to those things which were probabilities for them, and which would have led them so profitably to greatness. The record of probabilities showed that in years to come Australia would have been impressed by such a successful scheme, and would have copied the scheme in the dead heart of Australia, where the furnace-like desert dries up everything. But Australia could be opened up as Uruguay could have been opened up. The old man had seen enough of Uruguay, and so with just a farewell wave he lofted higher and higher and sped with the speed of thought across the face of the world, across oceans, across lands, to another destination. I want you to tell us more about astral travel, how we can do it. You've written about it in You Forever and in other books, but tell us again. You cannot tell us too much about it. Tell us how we can do it. And so go the letters. So go the demands. Tell us about astral travel. Actually, astral travel is the simplest of things. So simple that it is surprising that people cannot do it without trying. But we must also remember that walking is simple. Walking is so simple that we can walk in a straight line or follow a curved path, and we do not have to think about it at all. It comes naturally to us. Yet on many occasions a person has been very ill and confined to bed for some months, and the sufferer has then forgotten how to walk. He or she has forgotten how to walk and has had to be taught all over again. It is the same with astral travel. Everybody could once do astral travel, but for some strange reason they have forgotten precisely how to do it. How do you teach a person how to walk? How do you teach a person, lung encased in an iron lung, to breathe? How do you teach a person to travel in the astral? Possibly only by recounting the steps in the process. Possibly only by being what some would call repetitious, can one induce a person to teach his or herself how to get again into the astral? Suppose you have a sponge. An ordinary big bath sponge will do, and then you could call it the body. Suppose you fill the holes in the sponge with a gas which clings together. That is, it doesn't disperse like most gases do. It hangs together like a cloud. Well, this gas you can call the astral. It is now in the sponge, so you have one entity inside another. The sponge representing the body, and the gas filling the otherwise empty spaces in the sponge and representing the astral body. If you shake the sponge, you may dislodge the cloud of gas. In the same way, when your body gives a little jerk under controlled conditions, the astral body jumps free. The best way to prepare for astral travel is to think about it. Think about it very seriously from all aspects, because as you think today, so you are tomorrow, and what you think about today, you can do tomorrow. Ask yourself, why do you want to astral travel? Ask yourself honestly, what really is your reason? Is it merely idle curiosity? Is it so that you can spy on others? Or do you want to fly through the night and peer into bedrooms? Because if that's your objective, you'd be better off without astral travel. You must be sure that your motives are right before you do astral travel, or even before you try to do astral travel. Then, having assured yourself that your motives will stand the strictest inspection, prepare the next step. When you go to bed, alone, make sure you're not tired. Make sure that you are fresh enough that you can stay awake. Everyone can do astral travel, but the majority of untrained people fall asleep in the process, which is very annoying indeed. So, go to bed before you are tired and rest in any way comfortable in your bed, and then think that you are moving out of your body. Let yourself become completely relaxed. Have you tension in your big toe? Does your ear itch? Have you an ache in the small of your back? Any of these will indicate that you are not truly relaxed. You must be truly relaxed, just as a sleeping cat is relaxed. And having been quite sure that you are relaxed, imagine that something is coming out of your body. Imagine that you are the gas seeping out of the sponge. You might experience a little tingling. You might hear some short, sharp crackles, or you may get pins and needles in the back of your neck. That's fine. Just means that you are coming out. Now be very, very sure that you keep still. It is utterly necessary that you do not panic. It is absolutely vital that you do not feel fear, because panic or fear will slap you back in the body and give you quite a fright. It will also effectively prevent you from consciously astral traveling for about 3 months. Astral travel is normal. It is utterly, utterly safe. No one can take over your body. No one can harm you. All that can happen is this. If you are frightened, unpleasant astral entities will smell or see the color of fright, and will, with the greatest of glee, try to frighten you more. They cannot hurt you. They cannot hurt you at all. But it does give them great pleasure if they can frighten you so much that you are chased back in to your physical body. There is no secret in astral travel. It just needs confidence. It just needs the firm knowledge that you're going to do astral travel while you're fully awake. And the best way to start about it is to imagine that you're traveling. Imagine that you're out of your body. This word imagination is badly misused. Perhaps it would be better to say picture. So, picture yourself leaving your flesh body. Picture yourself gradually inching out of your flesh body and floating inches above the recumbent flesh body. Actually, picture yourself doing it. Actually form the strong thoughts that you are doing it. And sooner or later, you will do it. You will find, with the greatest amazement, that you are floating there, looking down upon a padded, whitish-green flesh body. Probably it will have its mouth open. Probably it will be snoring away, because when you are out of it, it doesn't matter at all if your flesh body goes to sleep when you are out. Because if you get out while the body is awake, you will remember the whole experience. This is what you have to imagine. You are resting completely, relaxed on your bed, in any position which suits you, provided it is comfortable and relaxed. Then you think of yourself slowly edging out from the flesh covering, from the flesh body, slowly edging out and rising and floating a few inches or a few feet above the flesh body. Do not panic, even if you do get a few sways and tilts, because you cannot be hurt. You cannot be hurt at all, and as you are floating, you cannot fall. When you have got to that stage, rest a while. Just keep still. You don't need to feel panic nor triumph. Just rest peaceably for a few moments. And then, if you think you can stand the shock, and depending on what sort of a body you've got, gaze down on the thing you've left. It looks all lopsided. It looks lumpy and heavy. It looks an untidy mess. Well, aren't you glad to get away from it for the time being? With that thought, you should take a look at the world outside. So, will yourself to rise, will yourself to float up through the ceiling and through the roof. No, you won't feel anything. You won't get a bump or a scrape or a jar. Just will yourself to float up and picture yourself so floating. When you get out through the roof, stop when you're about 20 or 50 feet above and look about you. You can stop by thinking that you are stopped, and you can rise by thinking that you are rising. Look about you. Look at your surroundings from a viewpoint that you have never seen before, so far as you can remember. Get used to being out of the body. Get used to moving around. Try floating around the block. It's easy. You just have to tell yourself where you're going, and you just have to tell yourself how fast you are going. That is, do you want to go along slowly, as if blown by the breeze, or do you want to go there instantly? People write and say they have tried everything they know to do astral travel, but for some reason or other they didn't succeed. A person will write and say, I had a strange tickling in the back of my neck. I thought I was being attacked and it frightened me. Another person writes in to say, I seem to be lying on the bed, without the power to move. I seem to be looking through a long red tunnel with a glimmer of something which I cannot describe at the other end. And yet another person writes, "Oh my goodness me, I fell out of my body and I was so frightened that I fell back in again." But these are perfectly ordinary, perfectly normal symptoms. Each of these symptoms can occur when you're getting out consciously for the first time. These are good signs, signs that you are able to astral travel consciously, signs that you have your hand on the door, so to speak, and the door is slowly opening. But then you take fright right on the threshold of this wonderful experience, and you panic, and back you go into that damp, miserable clay case again. Only fear can cause you any real difficulty. Everything else can be overcome. But fear, well, if you will not master your fear of the apparently unknown, what else can one do for you? You have to make some effort yourself. You can't put some money in a slot machine and get some pre-packaged astral travel kit, you know. Well, when you get a tickling sensation, it means that your astral body is actually freeing itself from the physical body, and for some particular reason, the process is causing a tickle, which is, after all, some slight form of irritation. It just means that you have not been doing astral travel very often, because with practice, the separation of the two bodies becomes easier and easier. Just by way of digression, let me tell you this. I was writing this chapter on astral travel, and I suppose I was thinking about it too intensely or something, and immediately I found myself floating about this building, right outside, and looking down. A member of my household was just coming up the road carrying a load of groceries. I saw her come in and have a mild listen at my door to see if I was working or not. And then, undecided, she passed on to another room. I looked about and thought, "Oh my goodness me, I'm shirking," and dived back again straight into the body and carried on working. But it just shows that when one is practiced in astral travel, it is no more difficult to get out of the body than it is to leave a room by opening a door and stepping out. Actually, it's less effort. It's far less effort. When a person is reclining and then suddenly feels paralyzed, that is a perfectly normal sign. There is nothing wrong with it. It just means that the separation of the two bodies is preventing physical body motion. And the so-called paralysis is a misnomer, really. It is just a strong physical disinclination to move. One, often at the same time, seems to be peering through a long tube. It might be a red tube or a black tube or a gray tube. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's a good sign. It shows you you're getting out. The biggest thing to fear is fear itself, because all these things are perfectly ordinary. There is nothing at all unusual in them. But if you are going to give way to panic, well, you come straight back into the body with a real clunk. And if you come back in misalignment, then you'll have a headache for the rest of the day until you go to sleep again and relocate your astral in the physical. It sometimes happens that one gets slightly out of the body, and then a swaying motion is experienced. That's all right too. It just means you have not learned how to handle the astral body properly. You can think of it as a person learning to steer a motor car. You get in the wretched thing and give the wheel a turn and then turn it too far. So you turn the other way and you find you are turning too far that way. So you progress in a sort of S-curve until you learn to manage the steering properly. It is precisely the same with the astral. You start emerging from the body, and then, when you're a few inches out, you sort of lose your nerve. You do not know how to get out a foot or 2 feet, etc., and so you stay there swaying. The only thing to do is visualize yourself as out. Yes, no doubt much of this appears to be repetition to you. Deliberately it is repetition, because you need to get this firmly established that astral travel is quite normal and quite easy and not at all dangerous. The only thing to fear is of being afraid, and you need only fear being afraid, because it puts back your progress. It's like locking on the brakes hard. Once you're in a state of fear, you're not in control of yourself, and your body chemistry gets jangled. So, do not be afraid, because there is no cause whatsoever to fear anything in the astral. It really is a superb, a glorious experience to just get out of your physical body and float along in the air. You do not have to do long journeys. You can let yourself just drift, perhaps 30 or 40 feet above the ground. You will feel a gentle rise from air currents, especially when you pass over trees. Trees give a nice updraft, a warm sort of friendly updraft, and if you let yourself float and maintain a constant height over a clump of trees when in the astral, you'll find that your vitality improves very greatly. But this astral travel is a pleasure which has to be appreciated. There are no words which can adequately describe it. You are out of the body and you feel free. You feel as if you've been recharged with life. You feel as if you're sparkling all over, and it is one of the best experiences of all. It can be your experience too, if you really want it. Thousands of people have written to me saying how surprisingly easy they now find astral travel, telling me of their travels and telling me that they've seen me on their astral travels. What these people can do, you can do also. But let us go into the matter a little further to try to find out what is preventing you from enjoying this wonderful experience. First of all, do you sleep alone? That is in your own room, because if you share a bed with someone else, then you may find it a bit difficult. There's always the fear that another person turning over will disturb one's astral flight. So, while initiating astral travel, you should always be alone, quite alone, in your room. One cannot, for example, easily practice astral travel when one lives in barracks with a lot of other men or a lot of other women. Nor can you easily start astral travel if you've just been married. You have to be alone. You have to keep your mind on astral travel, and then you can do it. From letters, it appears that the greatest vice of those who are trying to astral travel is impatience. North Americans in particular want instant astral travel. They're not prepared to wait for it, nor to work for it. They have no patience. They want a thing faster than fast and quicker than now. Well, it's not done that way. You have to be in the right condition first. You have to exercise patience. Just as if you had been in bed a long time, you would have to exercise patience while you were relearning to walk. Have patience then, and have faith that you can do this thing. Visualize yourself floating above your body, because imagination is a most potent force. And if you can get yourself started, well, the rest is utterly simple. Astral travel is the simplest thing that we can do. Even breathing needs some effort. Astral travel needs the absolute negation of effort. After impatience, the next great fault preventing one from getting into the astral state is overtiredness. People flap about all day, rushing about like a hen with its head chopped off, dashing to the cinema or to the supermarkets and cavorting across the country. Then, when they're nearly dropping with tiredness, they get into bed and think that they'll do astral travel. Well, they do, but they're so tired that they go to sleep and forget all the traveling, or rather forget all the experiences of that travel. Make no mistake about it. You do astral travel when you're asleep. The trick is to stay awake and do it. It is just a knack which one has to acquire as one gets the knack of breathing. The doctor slaps one's bottom when one is born, and one draws an outraged breath so that one can yell in protest, and breathing is started. Well, I can't come over and slap you all on the bottom to start your astral traveling, but it really is a simple matter and needs just a little knack. Impatience and overtiredness, then, are the two great causes of failure to remember. There is another cause, and that is constipation. If you are constipated, you are usually so gloomy that the poor, wretched astral form is imprisoned in a congested lump of clay. Constipation is the curse of civilization. And perhaps as it is so important for our astral travel study that one not be constipated, we should devote a whole chapter to health things. So, read on later in this book on how to get rid of constipation. When you get garbage out of your body, you'll find that you are so much freer that you can get into the astral. Someone wrote to me and said, "But look, all these astral bodies that you say float around by day and night, why don't their silver cords get entangled? Why don't they collide? You say that thousands of people leave their bodies and soar upwards like balloons on the end of a string. How can this be without hopeless tangling occurring?" The answer to this is easy. Everyone has a different frequency. Every physical body has a certain frequency, and the astral body has a frequency several octaves higher. The astral body is obviously on a harmonic of the physical body, but the vibration is many million times faster than in the physical body. Everyone has a different frequency or a different rate of vibration. And if you get the BBC London on your radio, you get the BBC, London. You do not get Radio Turkey or Radio Peking on that wavelength or frequency. One could say that the frequencies of radio stations do not interfere with each other, and in the same way, the frequencies of different astrals do not interfere with each other, so they cannot collide. So there is no tangling and there is no confusion. On a busy street in a busy city, you'll have people bumping into each other and either apologizing or scowling according to their makeup, but such things never occur in the astral. There are no collisions. The only ones that can come close to each other in the astral worlds above the lower astral are those who are compatible. You cannot have discord, and a collision is usually a discord, is it not? Everyone knows that many people say, "This problem, I can't deal with it now, I'll sleep on it. I shall have the answer in the morning." Well, that's fair enough, because people with problems take the problem into the astral world, and if they can't solve it themselves, there's always someone available who can. And then, if they can't do conscious astral travel, they still come back with some memory of how the problem can be solved. People, like great musicians, go to the other side and go to a zone above the lower astral. They hear this wondrous spiritual music, and then, because they are basically musical, because they have musical perception, they memorize it. And when they awaken in the morning, or they might even waken specially, they rush to a musical instrument and, as they think, compose. Some great composers kept paper and pencils by their bedside so that if they woke up with inspiration, they could write down the musical notation immediately. This is stuff they have learned in the astral. This is music which they learned in the astral, and it is a legitimate use of astral travel. A great inventor may have seen something in the astral, but possibly he didn't do astral travel consciously. So when he awakens in the morning, he has a wonderful idea for a new invention, and he rushes to his notebooks, and he writes down specifications, and he draws squiggles, and then, well, he's invented something which the world has wanted for quite a long time. Many highly successful businessmen use astral travel consciously or unconsciously, and this is how it works. A man who is very successful at interviewing decides that he has a very tough person to see on the morrow. So when he's in bed, he goes through his routine and he talks to himself and says what he proposes to say to his prospect when he meets him tomorrow. He anticipates all the objections and arguments of the prospect, and he refutes them as he lies there in bed, and then he falls asleep. His astral has got the idea, and when the physical body is asleep, the astral gets out and goes in search of the body or the astral of the prospect, and tells the prospect what is going to be said on the morrow, and also tells the prospect what action the latter should take. On the morrow, at the interview, the two greet each other like old friends. They're sure they've met before. They find they're getting along famously, and the successful interviewer puts over his points to the prospect and really does get the action desired. It is simple, highly successful, and entirely legitimate. So if you want to get success in business or love, well, go in for astral travel. You get your word in first. You get the action you desire firmly implanted into the prospect's mind. A lot has been said about getting out of the body, and you can get out of the body. Once out, you can always return. I suppose never in history has there been an authentic case when a person could not get back. You can get back all right, but you want to get back in the most pleasant conditions, because if you get all slap happy and just jump into your clay case, you can get a headache. When you're coming back from your astral travel, you see your flesh body lying there on the bed, usually in a contorted attitude, eyes shut, mouth open, limbs in wild abandon, and you have to get into that body. Visualize yourself lowering and lowering and lowering, oh so gently. Then, when you're just barely out of contact, put your own limbs in precisely the same attitude as that of the physical body, and then let yourself be absorbed into the body, like moisture being absorbed by blotting paper. You are in the body. It's a cold and clammy thing indeed, but you are in, and there has been no shock, no jerk, no unpleasantness. But supposing you were clumsy and you got in with an awful jerk, then you'll find that you've got an awful headache. You'll find that you feel sort of sick. There's only one thing to do. No medicine, no drugs will help you at all. There is only one thing possible, and that's this. Just lie still, with your feet together and your hands together, and let yourself go to sleep. Even though it be for a few moments only, just go to sleep, so that the astral body can ease out of the physical body and sink in again and relocate itself exactly. When it is relocated exactly, you have a sense of well-being and no headache, and that's all there is to it. In this chapter, quite a lot has been said about astral travel. Far more than need have been said. But the whole idea was to repeat things from different angles so that you could perhaps grasp the underlying statement, so that it is very, very easy. You can do it, provided you do not try too hard. You can do it provided you have patience. You cannot go along to a ticket agency or a travel agency and just book an astral flight, you know. Some of the flights cost a lot of money, but in the astral world, it's all free. And you can have it for free if you have patience and are not too tired. So, go to it. It truly is a wonderful, wonderful sensation. End of chapter 2.